Welcome to podcast number 18 of Short Stories by J. Mel. This podcast is entitled The Killer Kid Gang. When Joe and I were growing up in ranch country on the rolling plains of West Texas, we read and watched stories about notorious outlaws on the western frontier. Tales abounded of hard-riding, infamous criminals who robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches with guns blazing and made daring escapes into the rugged badlands of Indian Territory. Their glamorized escapades always involved fast horses and secret hideouts, larger than life, especially in death. These unscrupulous cowboys portrayed a lifestyle of unlimited excitement and unbridled passion lived in excess, though short in duration. As kids with real horses, large expanses of native rangeland, gullies, and vivid imaginations, we became those infamous outlaws. And this is the story of one of our many adventures about how two infamous outlaws met and formed a little-known gang as the Killer Kid Gang. Ring, ring, ring. Hello, Joe said in his slow Texas drawl. For some reason, as he spoke, my 7-year-old brain made an association between Joe, a young boy of my age, and a baby horned toad. Well, the baby horned toad is an exact miniature replica of an adult horned toad who hasn't changed much in the last 100 years. By comparison, Joe was a miniature, tall, lanky cowboy from the 1880 era. And cowpokes like them still existed to a large measure when we were kids. They worked on the large cattle ranches common to our area back in the day. They still existed when we were kids on huge spreads of land like the 4-6 Ranch, the Pitchfork Ranch, and the Matador Land and Cattle Company. Joe was a spitting image of his father and older brother and effortlessly brandished their Texas brawl. He always, and I mean always, wore a Stetson hat, cowboy boots, long-sleeve western-cut shirt, Levi's, and a leather belt. He unabashedly displayed more admiration and fondness towards horses and hunting dogs than most people. And proof of that fact, after reaching adulthood, and this is a true fact, as some West Texas folks would say, his wife gave him a choice between her and his equine and canine friends. She was not his choice. Anyway, I shook the thought off and asked, "You want to spend the day riding?" Without hesitation, Joe replied, "Sure, I'll meet you at the northeast corner of our place, okay?" I whispered, "Bring plenty of ammo." Well, I hurried into the kitchen and began packing a lunch for the trail. Mom watched silently and then inquired, "You running away?" I replied matter-of-factly, "Me and Joe are going to go riding the pastures today and thought we might need some grub." She snapped back with a subtle smile and a shake of her head. "Joe and I," emphasizing the I, "are going riding. How many states or territories do you expect to explore on your ride? And don't you think you should get permission first?" I responded with my head in the refrigerator, "Don't we have any of those apricot preserves you made last year?" Yes, they are in the basement," she retorted, and then emphasized, "That does not answer my question, young man." Sensing the ominous tone of her voice, I looked up at her and replied, "We plan to meet at the corner of Joe's place and spend the day in that general area of the pastures and creeks, if that's okay. Joey'll ride Bondi, and I'll be on Judy." Judy was our part Shetland pony. Mom replied, "Stay clear of the East Afton Highway unless you go up to Joe's house, and don't pester any rattlers or bother anyone's cattle." That was clearance for the day's activities in my mind. As I rushed from the kitchen to the toy playroom where the basement door was, I said, "We won't rustle any cattle or rope any cars, Mom." I wasn't worried about parental clearance since Joe and I had in the past explored an area that stretched all the way from our land to the South Pease River in the past and frequently rode our horses on each other's pastures. This was no big deal to our parents. The basement was not my favorite place. Its entrance was a floor door that had a handle on one of its long sides used to pull it up on its hinges, exposing a dark, foreboding staircase that descended into an earthen hole under our house. The light switch was inconveniently located inside the basement on a 2x4 board attached vertically to the second or third step down into the basement. Entrance to that depth was creepy because it was dark and the light from above exposed spider webs, and the ambient air was very cool, which made it feel like you were entering into another dimension. I carefully descended to the third step where I could see the dark outline of wooden shelves on the left of the staircase. Finding the light switch, I bent down as I descended deeper to view the shelves on my left and find solace that a rattlesnake was not flickering its tongue at me. We did not expect to find rattlesnakes every time we visited the basement, just occasionally. And when we did, we summoned our dad, and he would promptly send them to rattlesnake purgatory. He explained that rattlesnakes had a positive role in our ecology, but that it did not include our house, barns, or cow pens. When he found them in our way, he killed them. He had a quart jar of rattlesnake rattlers that he kept on display on his old roll-top desk. It was full. He only kept the biggest ones. I quickly found the preserves, blew the dust off the jar to confirm that it had Mom's apricot preserve label on it, and exited the basement to finish packing our lunch. Joe and I caught our respective mounts, Blondie and Judy, and saddled up. We each buckled our gunslinger pistol holders around our hips, attached our rifles and makeshift saddlebags to our saddles, pulled our hats tight on our heads, and trotted towards our rendezvous point. It was about a half a mile from Joe's house and about a mile from mine. As we made our way to the destination point, our minds were flooded with limitless adventures of bank robberies, stagecoach cases, and Indian raids ready to be staged better than those we witnessed on television, like Roy Rogers, The Lone Ranger, Gunsmoke, and Wagon Train. We met and immediately saw a stagecoach in distress that needed heroic action, that required racing our gallant steeds into a nearby pasture that took us into a creek bed where the main imaginary adventure began. The autumn night was clear, with a slippery smile from the moon surrounded by a full canopy of stars, when Billy heard someone approaching his campsite, nestled in the bottom of a dry creek bed enclosed by mesquite trees rustling in the breeze. His campfire cast eerie shadows on the 5-foot creek bed walls and would only be visible as a glow by someone passing by. Still, he was jumpy. He pulled his .45 pacemaker and tried to blend into the shadows cast on the southeast side of the campfire. He heard Blondie, his horse, snort. Listening intently, he heard the saddle speak as someone dismounted and gently put weight on one leg, touching the grass and twigs on the prairie floor. He moved silently towards the sound and peeked over the top of the creek. Not 10 feet away, he saw the shadows of a man dismounting his horse. He was facing him. Billy slowly positioned his pistol towards the shadow and cocked it, amplified by the silence of the night. The shadowy figure froze, and Billy shouted, "Who goes there? If you want to live, drop your gun and walk towards my voice." The shadowy figure replied, I ain't pulling my gun and I ain't gonna drop it. I ain't aiming to do no harm, just passing through and I thought I might get a cup of joe. Who are you?" Billy, surprised by the stranger's noncompliance, said, "I got eyes like a hoot owl and can see you ain't complying with my orders, so you must have a backbone and a tiny brain. Step to your left and come down into the creek where I can lay campfire eyes on you. Make one small move and I'll blow your brains out." The stranger complied, and soon was on the opposite side of the campfire from Billy. They closed ranks on the campfire and studied each other's faces intently. Finally, the stranger spoke. "I know you. I seen your likeness on a wanted poster in Wichita not 6 months ago. You're on the run, Billy. Billy the Kid." Billy lowered his pacemaker as he said, "Well, I'll be damned. You're a poster boy, too. I seen it in Abilene not long ago. Can't remember your name, but it was on a poster with Butch Cassidy, and I ought to just shoot you right here and now and collect that $1,000 bounty." The stranger laughed and said, "How you gonna collect the bounty without getting arrested when you try to do it? Talk about a dumbass. I expect we need to be friends, 'cause we can't be enemies and survive. I am the Sundance Kid. I reckon if we form a gang, it'll have to be called the Kid Gang." Billy laughed as he holstered his gun and replied, "Not a very intimidating name, if you ask me. Be better if we called it the Killer Kid Gang. I am Billy the Kid. Put your horse up and have a cup of joe." Billy and Sundance drank joe and shared embellished and over-dramatized story of daring criminal capers until the whispering winds in the darkness and the mournful serenade of the coyotes lulled them to sleep next to a crackling campfire. The campfire was still smoldering when Billy awoke the next morning with a large rattlesnake snuggled in the blanket along his backside. Recognizing its presence, he slowly found his peacemaker, took a true aim, and kaboom! Removed the reptile's head, leaving a squiggling, headless snake behind, and a new friend rudely awakened and instantly in a deep crouch position with his big iron aimed at Billy. Gasping for breath, Sundance explained, "Couldn't you have found a more subtle way of taking care of that pest? Damn near scared me to death." Billy grinned and calmly replied, "I don't cotton to no rattler bedding down with me, and it'll make a tasty breakfast." After a hearty rattlesnake breakfast, Billy invited Sundance to ride with him to a special hideout with ample supplies, abundant game, and fresh spring water. It was a safe place to wait out the posses and relax. Sundance agreed. It was a 7-day ride to the secret hideout, and Billy and Sundance became close friends on the way. They passed through 2 small towns on the way without being recognized. One of them had a bank. As they rode out of town late in the evening, Sundance said, "Did you see that bank?" Billy grunted as he said, "That's a dumb question to ask a bank robber." "Yeah, I seen it. Maybe we could hit that bank after we rest up. What do you think, Sundance? Could the Killer Kid Gang pull it off?" "I ain't never worked with you before, but I could pull that one off all by myself. So I suppose I could do it with you tagging along. The question is it worth the effort?" Sundance responded. Billy countered, "I've got a hunch that town may be a stop for the money wagon that takes payroll to the prison at Fort Benjamin. If it is, it would be worth considering on that day. I expect we could keep our eyes open for that." Well, 3.5 days later, they arrived at the foothills of a rocky group of hills of varying sizes interspersed with trees. They followed a babbling spring up the hills, through the valleys, and into a secluded area bordered on all sides by rocky, rugged cliffs. Billy glided them to a cave recessed in the corner, with a spring on one side and boulders guarding the entrance. There was a natural green pasture for the horses to graze, a pond with fresh water, and a cache of supplies stashed just inside the entrance to the cave. It included lanterns, pots and pans, knives, ammunition, bedrolls, cooking supplies, and toiletry items. There was even a large tarp to cover the entrance, and a tin smokestack and wood-burning stove to cook on and heat the cavern. Sundance was impressed. The duo relaxed in their new hideout and grew to be best friends. Ever so often they saddled up and went to the nearest town in disguise to scout out the payroll wagon train schedule. On their third visit, they struck pay dirt and learned that there was such a train that would pass through that small town they had come through that had the bank. The local resident said it always stopped for the night at that town and put its load of money in the vault at the bank for the night. It typically departed the town with the money before noon the following day. They learned that the next stop would be on the second Tuesday of the next month, 3 weeks away. Billy and Sundance hatched a plan to rob the bank of the payroll money. Sundance said, "I'll shoot my Winchester lever-action rifle with a burlap bag wrapped around its muzzle as a silencer and crease the skull of the guard at the back door of the bank, knocking him unconscious, and then drag him away from the building and tie him up." Billy chimed in, "Yeah, and on your command, we'll both light sticks of dynamite with equal length fuses. You'll toss your stick into the back porch of the bank, and I'll toss my stick onto the boardwalk of the saloon at the same time as a diversion." Sundance continued, "And then we'll both enter the bank with guns blazing and snatch the lockbox full of payroll money and run out the back door to our waiting horses tied in the creek." Billy finished the plan with, "Then we'll gallop north in the stream until we reach the rocky flats 3 miles up the river, where we'll exit the river onto the rocky shore without leaving footprints and hightail it to our hideout." The daring bank robbery was pulled off flawlessly, using an abandoned farmhouse as the bank and an old circuit breaker box as the safe. The treasure was a series of risque poker cards, a rusty pocket knife, 2 usable cigarette butts, and a coil of copper wire. The plan to escape to the hideout was abandoned when they heard a car approaching and had to make a real escape down a dry creek bed. They galloped down the creek about a half a mile and found a deep ravine where they dismounted and hid their horses. They stayed there for a long time, and then when they were sure the coast was clear, Joe said, "What you going to do now, James?" James said, "That was a close call. It's getting close to supper time. Let's bury our treasure under that big mesquite in the northeast corner of your place. We can dig it up later." Joe agreed. We rode back to the tree, crawled under the fence, dug a deep hole at the base of the tree, and buried the box. He rode south, I rode north. The adventure was complete for that day. We never retrieved the box. I guess we both understood. The box wasn't the treasure. What we wanted, we already received. An exciting, dramatic adventure, friendship, and an excuse to ride our horses back in time and create a new memory. We didn't realize it at the time, but those are the real treasures that survive the test of time. Thank you. The end.